Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today I went and viewed Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I managed to make effective use of my royal imperial influence and did not pay for a ticket to view this film. Lucasfilm did not receive a penny from me. I'm going to provide you, ladies and gentlemen, first with a spoiler-free review. Second, a quick spoiler-chained review, and then I'm going to provide a more comprehensive review which will be laden with spoilers. Here is the quick spoiler-free review. The Rise of Skywalker is an entertaining, nostalgia-filled film. It has the J.J. Abrams touch, which means you'll probably find it enjoyable if you turn your brain off and ignore how uninspired it is. Here is the quick spoiler-chained review. There have been many leaks and rumours concerning this film. I managed to resist the temptation and did not read any of the rumoured leaks. However, after watching the film, I decided to check out these leaks, and in the words of Han Solo,
"It's true. All of it."
Alright, that is a bit of an exaggeration. However, the major details which have been leaked are correct. Heavy Spoilers did a video on the 11th of December going through the plot, and all the major details in his video are on point. Some of the things he mentions don't happen, but it is all the minor stuff. So basically, Rey is the granddaughter of Palpatine. Palpatine is alive, and Ahsoka Tano isn't seen in the film. But there is a part where Rey hears the voices of all the Jedi urging her on, and I think I recognised Ahsoka's voice. All well and good. But what of my detailed thoughts? What do I think of the film? A few disclaimers here. First, these are my initial thoughts. I may say things which I will contradict in future videos because of further thought and reflection, although I must confess, my current thoughts are unlikely to change a great deal. Second, my memory is not perfect, so I will get some details wrong or order them incorrectly. Third, I've written some notes, but to be honest, I'm not going to bother writing a full script for this, and so the review is going to be a rambling one. I'm also unsure how much of this video I shall edit. Let's begin. Script down. This film is a patch job because of The Last Jedi, essentially. The film the film's opening title crawl literally starts with Star Wars, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and then immediately after that, the dead speak. And then it goes on to explain that Palpatine's voice has been heard by Force-sensitive people, and Kylo Ren is searching for Palpatine. An indefinite amount of time has clearly passed between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, and the film doesn't really pay much reference to The Last Jedi. The only thing it mentions, which is a result of The Last Jedi, is that Kylo Ren is the supreme leader of the First Order. That is all. J.J. Abrams clearly thought that it was best to pretend, for the most part, that The Last Jedi didn't happen. And we'll talk about that in a bit, because, as you can guess, that is actually very important. Now, I'm going to summarise the basic plot here, because it will make things simpler. So, after this title crawl, we see Kylo Ren just slaughtering people, and he gets to this triangular holocron, I think it's called, and it's actually a device which you connect to the navigation systems of a ship, and it will tell you how to navigate a certain hyperlane and get you into the atmosphere into the system the Sith planet, and I think the name is actually Exoglar or Exoglah, but I swear the cast changed the pronunciation, but I swear the cast pronounced the name differently at different times during the film. Anyway, so Kylo Ren lands. He goes alone in his TIE fighter. He's the supreme leader, yet he goes alone in his TIE fighter for some reason. No bodyguard. He goes there. He finds Palpatine, and he's about to kill Palpatine because he doesn't like competitors. Palpatine explains that he is the puppet master behind everything, basically he says he invented Snoke, and it's suggested that Snoke's a clone of some description. And then he says that he can offer Kylo Ren lots of power. And a whole fleet of ships, like hundreds of Star Destroyers, just emerge from the ice of the planet. The planet is an ice planet, and they just emerge from out of nowhere. There's hundreds of them. They're in neat rows. And Palpatine says to Kylo, well, I'll help you conquer everyone, but you must go and get Rey for me. Go and kill Rey for me. And then we go to the Resistance, who are contacting a mole within the First Order. And then we go to Rey, who is training in a jungle. And the Resistance seem to be back to full strength for some reason. I mean, in The Last Jedi, they basically all died except for a handful. But apparently, they just replenished their men, their equipment. There's X-Wings again. It's almost as if The Last Jedi didn't actually happen. And then the plot actually begins. The mole confirms to the Resistance that Palpatine is back. They decide that he's on this. They infer that he's on this planet, and they have to get another one of those triangular holocrones to try and get to the planet to attack the fleet. And they know the fleet exists because of this intel. And yes, the fleet, by the way, is part of what the Emperor says is his final order. Yes, JJ, I see what you did there. I want to talk about some of the things in this film, and the thing is, this really is a patch job of The Last Jedi, because The Last Jedi is responsible for so many things which appear in this film. So, here's an interesting one. Hux is now a comic relief character. So, if you remember back to Force Awakens, Hux wasn't a comic relief character. I mean, he was. I suppose Rian Johnson was right when he said he was kind of funny. And there's like that speech Hux does on Starkiller Base where he sounds a bit fanatic and it's a bit hammy. But by and large, Hux wasn't comic relief. He wasn't funny. He was more or less portrayed as a competent commander, more or less. And in some ways, he seemed in the hierarchy to be equal to Kylo Ren. But General Hux in this film is just comic relief. He's not the second in command of the First Order, even though it was suggested at the end of The Last Jedi that he was. And I think the reason for this is because after Rian Johnson made him a complete fool and a complete joke in The Last Jedi, after he did that, I think JJ and his fellow screenplay writer, I can't remember his name, just looked at each other and said, we can't make this guy threatening. So they invent another character. They just pull another character out of nowhere who no one has seen before, an older gentleman, an older commander called something Pride. This is actually one of the smaller changes as a result of The Last Jedi, but we can see how The Last Jedi broke a character so badly that J.J. Abrams decided that he actually couldn't be used for a villain role. And another thing is that, almost to counter the criticisms that Rey is too powerful, they actually have her train in the first scenes with Leia as a teacher, which is obviously to counter the argument that she trained herself and thus she's overpowered, etc., etc. Another thing is that JJ has to ignore things to make the film flow and to make it better. So, for instance, the fact that nobody wanted to fight with the Resistance at the Battle of Crate is completely ignored almost. I mean, it's addressed. I mean, Poe says to another character, no one showed up, and he explains how he's so dismayed by this, as he should be. And then towards the end of the film, an entire fleet of just random fighters, I mean, thousands of random fighters in all their starships, just shows up at the final battle to do battle with the Final Order fleet, the Emperor's fleet. So they're apparently all ready to fight the Emperor's fleet, But for some reason, they weren't willing to come to the aid of the Resistance at the Battle of Crate, and it's never really explained. So it's just something that JJ ignores almost. I mean, he has to obviously has to recognize it happened, but he can't. But he didn't. He just didn't actually address it. He didn't address the reasons why. Now, let's go on to something a bit funnier, because Rose and Finn are not a couple. Arguably, this is a fix. Like, he ignored what happened in The Last Jedi, where Rose kissed Finn without consent, and it was really unromantic. I mean, really, really unromantic. I mean, nobody shipped these characters. Like, nobody shipped them. And he just pretends that that never happened. Like, it's never addressed. It's never picked up. We don't even get the sense that they dated or decided that it wouldn't work or whatever. It's just ignored. It didn't happen. And then there are some things which JJ can't ignore and can't really fix. And one of these things is the Force ghosts interacting with the physical world. So Luke returns as a Force ghost. He raises his X-wing from the sea so that Rey can fly it at a pivotal point in the film, and he also stops Rey from throwing away Anakin's lightsaber, saying something like, "You shouldn't throw away a weapon like that," which is really ironic coming from the man who threw it away more or less at the start of The Last Jedi. And the thing is, JJ couldn't actually fix this. This had happened. We already saw Yoda set a tree on fire. So this was something he couldn't really pretend wasn't possible. And the problem with this, of course, is that now that Force ghosts, not goats, can interact with the physical world, it raises the question of, okay, Luke, then why don't you try to blow up a couple of starships? Send lightning into the engines of Star Destroyers, for instance. Why not? I mean, the reason that ghosts originally couldn't help people was because they were detached from the physical world. But now that they can interact with the physical world, that actually gives them a responsibility to try and act out their roles and stuff. That actually gives them a It gives them a responsibility to actually try and combat the evils which they are helping other people combat by giving prep talks. And then there is another problem which JJ has to half addresses. This one is like, we all knew this was coming. So there's a mission talk before the final battle takes place at the Resistance base, and the situation is dire. There's like 100 Imperial Star Destroyers, and they're equipped with cannons which can destroy planets. So they're all miniature Death Stars, essentially. And one of the pilots looks at the situation, and he says something akin to, "We need to do a Holdo maneuver." And of course, he's referring to the moment where Vice Admiral Pinky Holdo in The Last Jedi hyperdrived into the Supremacy. And Poe, he dismisses this suggestion by saying that was a 1 in a million shot. And this is JJ sort of walking on screen and walking on the screen and saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that this happened in The Last Jedi, and I understand now that it was a really bad decision for Rian to do this because it raises 100 questions about why light speed hasn't been weaponized before, and I realize that allowing it to be an option would make my battle really boring, so could we please pretend that for some reason it can't work here? Can we just pretend? I haven't given you a reason why, but please, ladies and gentlemen, consider this another mystery box. Why why can't it actually be used and why it's a one in a million shot. Please consider it another mystery box, and please just enjoy the film. This is JJ's way through the characters to say, look, I understand the criticism here, but can we please just accept that it can't be done because it would kill the drama and the tension. So I think I've overgone the problems and the flaws which are the result of Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi. But there are problems in this film where the blame has to lie on the current production staff, and ultimately that means J.J. Abrams himself. So, for instance, the Knights of Ren finally show up on screen properly in this film, and they are underwhelming. They aren't armed with lightsabers. They are armed with, normal melee weapons. One has a big axe, but they're not electric. They're not like the weapons which the combat droids in Revenge of the Sith had, which were sort of electric sticks and lightsabers couldn't cut through them. These are just, they look like Bob's standard weapons, and they don't kill anyone. They're not threatening. They don't kill a soul in this film. They beat up Kylo Ren for a little bit, after Kylo turns to the good side, but we'll discuss that later, and they beat him up for a bit, and really, by all accounts, Kylo being hit on the chin by some metal weapons, even with the blunt ends, he really should have, fallen unconscious. But he doesn't, and he gets a lightsaber, and he just kills them. Absolute slaughter. And this one's a small... And moving on to the next point, this is a small point, but it's actually an important point because this is something which has been established about Poe's character for a long time. So BB-8 is Poe's droid. Like, Poe really likes BB-8, we're told. We find out he really likes BB-8 in Force Awakens, and he refers to him as Buddy in both Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. This is a consistent thing in Poe's character. But BB-8 spends more time with Rey than with Poe. In the final battle, in fact, R2-D2 is in Poe's X-Wing, not BB-8. Yet, he's Poe's droid. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's almost as if JJ was writing the script, and he forgot this was a part of Poe's character. And even a part of BB-8's character, because BB-8 likes Poe. Okay, and now let's move on to an amusing one. So, by now, you're probably all familiar with the line, "They fly now." Now, that line was bad enough, but in the film, this is how it goes. So, the stormtroopers who are chasing them across the desert start to fly. C-3PO says, "They fly now." And for C-3PO, this dialogue actually makes sense. C-3PO is one of those characters who says things which are obvious at times. And actually, coming from his mouth, that sounded okay. But when Finn listens to what C-3PO says, turns to Poe and says, "They fly now," and then Poe, who's flying his own speeder, turns to no one and says, "They fly now." I mean, sure, for C-3PO, this makes sense. It could be a shock to C-3PO, but for Finn, who's been with the First Order, and for Poe, it makes no sense. They are soldiers. They've probably seen jetpacking infantry before. I mean, jetpacks appear in Star Wars all the time, and it's like it's kind of like, would anyone really be surprised by that? Did the First Order seriously only now start equipping, special troops with jetpacks? Did no one think to do this before? Because that's even more crazy than their reactions. Anyway, moving on to a few character points. Finn is still obsessed with Rey. It's like it's not quite as bad as The Force Awakens, but he is still it's almost all about Rey with him, and it really is frustrating to see any character obsess about another character so much. Normally in such cases, normally in it can be done well in films where it's supposed to be a character flaw, that another character obsesses about another one, for instance, or is constantly thinking about them, for instance. But yeah, he just is. And it's implied that he obviously has romantic feelings for her. And in a dangerous situation, he says he needs to tell Rey something, but he never tells her. Like, he never confesses anything toward the end of the film. It just doesn't happen. Okay, and now moving on to a couple of convenient things. I mean, the script is full of this, but I want to point at one example. Poe's ex-girlfriend, that's a whole story, but Poe's ex-girlfriend in a scene, and she's like a bounty hunter person, while they're on this planet and they're getting something done, shows Poe a First Order captain's badge. And she says this provides boarding privileges on Star Destroyers and such, and it's going to help her sneak past the First Order ships so that she can escape to a new planet. And then, in the very next scene, yes, the very next scene, when Rey and crew discover that Chewie is trapped on Kylo's Star Destroyer, and that they need to go on board, and they need to get on board to rescue him, Poe's ex gives them the token, which means that they can land on the ship, even though their ship isn't actually First Order. They just have this random ship which was used by a Sith decades ago, and they just use the badge somehow. I suppose they put it in a scanner and transmit the barcode on it or something. It's never explained. They just have this badge, and somehow it allows them to land on the Star Destroyer. And only only 4 men really that you see on screen are sent to go check who is on board. They just don't question. Like, nobody in like the communication control or the docking control actually questioned the signals that were sent about this thing. They just went, "Oh, okay. Obviously, it's not a bunch of resistance fighters who might be trying to sneak on board. It's clearly our ship, even if we don't have any ships which look like that." It's just a bit strange. And although it may not be the worst writing, but whenever you see something which is really convenient, you kind of can tell that the writers have written themselves into a wall and they don't know how to get out of it. And actually, speaking about ex-girlfriends and things, there is actually no real romance in the sequel trilogy. Like, there's no romance in here. I mean, there technically is, but allow me to explain. So, first of all, Poe has an ex-girlfriend, but they do not get together at the end of the film, even though they have the smallest amount of chemistry. And that may sound, really pathetic, but Rose and Finn didn't have any chemistry. So the fact that we actually see in the sequel trilogy a little bit of chemistry between two characters which might be romantic is rather interesting. But they don't get together. Like, JJ clearly played around with the idea and then decided against. So they don't get together. Now, here's where romance, in a technical sense, does appear. So Rey has to fight Palpatine. Who could have guessed this would be the case? But she dies when she defeats him. But in this film, characters can use the Force to heal each other. So if any of you played, what's it called again? Jedi Knights Academy, a computer game back in the day, there was this Force power where you could just heal your character, and this has now been made canon effectively. And Kylo Ren uses Force Heal to bring Rey back to life. When he does this, they both kiss, but he dies because he used his life force to bring her back with this power. He turns into a Force ghost because he returned to the light side. So to say there is romance is really difficult, as there was very little chemistry between the two. They sort of just kiss and it's done. It seemed to be JJ's way of appeasing Reylo shippers without doing anything which would tell the audience just how little chemistry there was, because if this had continued, like if Kylo didn't die and they were hand in hand at the end of the film, people would quickly realize the more time they spent on screen that these characters don't have anything. There's nothing between them really. It's just it's rather sterile. Okay, and finally, this is all on JJ. He made 6 endings, or at least that's the rumor, that there were 6 endings in the work and they they group tested them. The ending which I saw in the cinema, I mean, for all I know, the film could be re-released with another ending depending on how audiences respond. And I wouldn't put that past Lucasfilm at this point. But this ending, the ending I saw, is all about Rey. So here's how the film ends. So the Final Order is defeated, and apparently everyone is rising up against the First Order and are defeating them as well. And we see some celebrations on a jungle planet, which is where the Resistance are based. And then the film, it cuts to Rey going to Luke's old home on Tatooine. It's been abandoned. No one lives there. She takes Anakin's lightsaber, and she takes Princess Leia's lightsaber, which Princess Leia never uses in the film, but she takes it, and she buries them both in the sand. And she has BB-8 with her, but otherwise no one else is with her. And she is met by a traveling woman, and the traveling woman says to her, who asks her who she is. Rey says, "I'm Rey." Well, Rey who? And Rey turns and sees Luke Skywalker and Leia as Force ghosts standing next to each other. She looks at them, smiles, and says, "I'm Rey Skywalker." Then she and BB-8 look into the twin sun setting on Tatooine, and the film ends. I have to say, this is not a very good ending for 2 reasons. The first is that the film is called Rise of Skywalker, and yet Skywalker never rises. The last person who had any lineage to the Skywalker line was Kylo Ren, and he dies. So the Skywalker storyline, the Skywalker line, is finished. So, and Rey is a Palpatine. She's the granddaughter of Palpatine. So the ending is a misnomer. Sorry, the film's title is a misnomer. It isn't real. It isn't true. And she just sort of takes a name because, why not? It's really weird. But I think what's worse about it is that the film actually tries to stress the theme of friendship, the theme of cooperation, of fighting together. And the film ends with Rey and BB-8. Finn isn't there. Poe isn't there. None of the other characters are there. Lando Calrissian isn't there. No one's there. It's just Rey and BB-8 and the old travelling woman who is off camera. It's all about Rey, and it actually conflicts with one of the themes really quite poorly. Not good at all. But are there good things about this film? Because I said you could enjoy it if you decided to turn your brain off. There are good things about this film, obviously, and I'll be honest about them and about my feelings. So, I loved C-3PO in this film, and it should come as no surprise that I respect Sir Anthony Daniels immensely. I actually liked C-3PO's dialogue, especially. It was funny, and I think it was in character for the most part. He is very talkative in this film, and I will confess that I enjoyed that. Poe and Finn in this film have a friendship and have not a brothers in arms kind of relationship, but more of a happy co-workers relationship with some amusing banter. It isn't very fleshed out, and it doesn't feel that deep, so the friendship doesn't feel as deep as that which we saw between Luke and Han Solo in the original trilogy. It feels like it really needed to be fleshed out, and it felt like the time for fleshing it out was in the second film, but we know that Ryan neglected to do that. JJ manages to, make a friendship which looks kind of fun, but it doesn't feel very deep. Finn, thankfully, is not a cowardly character anymore. He is actually confident in this film, and it's nice to see that. He isn't incompetent either. And it's nice to see that, because he should have been like this in The Last Jedi. But Ryan just, made his character regress for some reason. And as well, another good thing is Finn isn't comic relief anymore. I mean, Finn was very bad comic relief, in my opinion, and you can only find a cowardly character who is supposed to be a soldier funny for a small amount of time. So C-3PO takes the comic relief role instead, and I think that works a lot better. And here's another good thing. Rey is far less of a Rey Sue. Well, not far less, but she is less of a Mary Sue. She actually nearly loses in a fight to Kylo, and is only saved by Leia distracting Kylo with the Force. And Rey actually has an internal conflict about not wanting to become a Sith, and so she decides to not face Palpatine. And to do this, she tries to do a Jake Skywalker and tries to hide on Porg Island. I'm not going to pretend that it's amazingly written or that this is incredible writing, but it is nice to see Rey have self-doubts, and it is nice to see her struggle with something. And arguably, this is the best film she's in, or this is the best film when it comes to her character, as I should say. Also, Lando's introduction in this film is actually fun. Lando isn't damaged like the other characters in this trilogy. Not like the other original characters, I mean. He doesn't have a milk scene or a Mary Poppins scene, so that is good, and we should be happy about that. I mean, it's only a small thing, really, because it's not too difficult not to write a milking scene or a Mary Poppins scene, but I guess we should be thankful either way. Okay, now, Y-Wings are in this film. What more can I say, really? There are Y-Wings. I like Y-Wings. And those bombers which we saw in The Last Jedi, we don't see them again. This is actually a fix from The Last Jedi, or should I say a payoff from The Last Jedi. So, we see Luke's X-Wing in The Last Jedi, and it's underwater. And in this film, it's actually raised from the water and used. And that was an enjoyable moment, if I am honest. An interesting scene was the one where Kylo Ren turns back to the light. And in this scene, a memory of Han Solo appears and talks to him. This scene has the same camera work and dialogue. Sorry, this scene has similar camera work and dialogue from the scene in Force Awakens where Kylo kills Han Solo. In other words, these scenes mirror each other. And if I'm honest, I actually liked this. I liked the fact that it mirrored The Force Awakens, even though The Force Awakens wasn't a good film. Because it made a plot point which I thought would be rather dull, interesting to watch. I knew at this point that Kylo Ren was going to turn to the light, but I was expecting a really boring transformation. This was actually somewhat inspired, and it was fun to watch, I'm not going to lie. Now, I have said I don't like the ending. There is one thing I like about it. So, I like the fact that Leia appears as a Force ghost, and I like this because I think it is a respectful nod to Carrie Fisher. That's about it, to be honest. So now I have discussed some specific details and some specific points. What are my broad thoughts? And do I have a conclusion, a wrap-up? I have to say, I think watching this and keeping The Force Awakens in mind, J.J. Abrams has a special touch. An uninspired and not very creative touch, but nevertheless, he has a strange power. He knows how to make something entertaining on a sort of visceral level. And what I mean by that is, you watch his films, and you think they are good, and then you step back and you pay some thought to the film and realise they're not so good. So The Force Awakens got positive initial reactions, including from yours truly. However, as time progressed, I and many others came to realise that The Force Awakens wasn't really a good film. The Force Awakens is really a repackaged plot with repackaged ideas and heavily laced with nostalgia, with a couple of mystery boxes added on the side. I mean, in actuality, it's nothing to write home about. And the same kind of techniques have been used with the Rise of Skywalker, because some of the dialogue is ripped straight from the previous films, either the prequels or the original trilogy. And many of the story structures, the conflicts, they're all more or less lifted from the previous films. They're just repackaged, or sometimes they're even played straight just for nostalgia value. And I have this sense that the fate which befell The Force Awakens awaits the Rise of Skywalker. So I am expecting people to talk about this film more or less positively for a couple of months, or even for the entirety of 2020. But time is not going to be very kind to this film, especially as the ending is very Rey-centric. Although, I may be wrong here, because the thing about The Force Awakens was it appealed directly to nostalgia, and it just repackaged the plot of the first Star Wars film. And as soon as people got past the hype, as soon as the effects of hype wore off, as soon as the hype disappeared, people saw what J.J. Abrams had done to make them like it, and they realised that there was nothing really substantive to The Force Awakens. And now that they know what J.J. Abrams does, I think that it's possible that a lot of audience members who started liking The Force Awakens and then decided it was a bad film are now going to watch this one, aware of J.J. Abrams' tricks, and they're going to see right through them. So it is possible, actually, that everyone will more or less hate this film, but if The Force Awakens is anything to go by, I do expect people to talk about it positively for some time, until people realise that actually it's not very well written, and that it is loaded with problems, and that it's not very original. I don't want to recommend that people go and see this film, because I don't think Lucasfilm or Disney deserve the money. However, if you really do not care about boycotting Lucasfilm or Disney, and just want to know if it will be a fun film to watch on an evening where you're doing nothing, the answer is yes, probably. You will have to turn your brain off, and you will have to be open-minded, and moreover, you'll have to enter the cinema while wanting to enjoy it. You've got to want to enjoy this film, because although it's entertaining on a surface level, I mean, it's Star Wars, it's going to be entertaining at least. Well, I say that, but The Last Jedi. But if you're hoping for a good, well-written story, I cannot find it within myself to recommend this film. Because if you go in there with a critical mind, you are going to see through this thing. If you liked this review, feel free to like and share it. You are also cordially invited to subscribe. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all have an excellent day, and I would like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas.